One of my favorite cities is Rhodes, on the Greek island that is named after the city of Rhodos. The poem, Mira and I have visited Rhodes several times. The poem pretty much explains itself. Returning to Rhodes. If you return to the harbor to tie up where birds once soared over the grand colossus and through the sun's corona, sky at a standstill, the sea a genial lingering as thought of an eternal city. And if you walk the old Jewish quarter where merchants called on Ottoman, Latino, Greek, Biblical Hebrew, and snippets of the new Italian to take care of their lives, you might wonder which gift of tongues, which words served them better with assiduous informers, or Mussolini's goons, or some rail connections to Auschwitz, or with the popular new idiolect, black on the arm, names taken away to long trenches of languages and ashen heaps of words. As a very young professor in my first or second year, I got to know an undergraduate student. He was, I believe, a first year college student, freshman, who came out of the closet, told his parents that he was gay. His father threw him out of the house and told him not to regard himself as a member of the family evermore. Grace holding its breath. When a father disowns his son, a door and new double lock become necessary. Time and place matter. And when the sun leaps into the night sky shimmering below, a bridge is necessary. And a Bible open to the 22nd Psalm. And it's necessary to say he died unexpectedly. After the readings, there's a moment that travels timeline's sleepless shadow with the final measure of amazing grace. Left hand whispering to the fingerboard's far end, the guitar stilled, yet somehow remembering the plectrum's last note from that moment ago. Grace, holding its breath, holding, farther and farther away. I'll conclude this part of the reading with a few selections from the first section of Find What Isn't Missing. The section is titled Cantos on Time and Distance, and it consists of 21 cantos plus a forward and afterward, a canto sequence. I'll start with Canto 10. Morning skreek that came as refugee ragman, horse and wooden sledge careening fitfully and surely over uneven fractures of old avenues. How long does it take to begin as a stranger in Montreal and end knowing this each seventh day when he reads the Yiddish Weekly in Mile End? He survived, had lives, and spoke words softly to his horse, as if from one of those lives, from deep inside of it. On Mondays, he cracked his whip on the winter's breath to close gaps of the day's disrepairs. Canto 14. When time nodded and sat quietly down beside me beneath the flowering chestnut in Hamburg, Germany's Ulster Park, the bench rocked slightly with the day's unevenness. Sun and slender shadows sensibly dressed the women and overdressed the men, walking large dogs on short leashes, not for the sake of the dogs, but for the second soul of what might be, friend, lover, home. Time watched as closely as I. We looked at each other, my silk smooth valise, an unfinished narrative between us. And the afterword. Always the astonishment of distance and the days, welcome or not. The sky's millennia seeking out progress from the past's torn fold lines. The sun refusing to grow smaller. Time still drawing to itself the horizon's red edge. As roads become familiar. As the distance ahead grows into a darkening guest room for the day's end to become word, word to become prophecy, headwind shutters pushing back. And back to Carol.
Well, thank you so much, Leonard. I was really engrossed in your poetry. Yes, it's beautiful and also not beautiful, I guess. Thank you. So I wonder if anyone has questions now for Leonard.
I was wondering if Leonard was going to read anything from Nearness, or did I miss it?
No, he said he would do that. If we have some questions, we would take them first,
okay.
And then he will read from Nearness, yes.
Len, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. I'm wondering, your poetry covers wide range of sort of shaped from out of time and place, your ancestral history and your travel experience, your vast experience. And I'm wondering, over time, has sort of what has shifted, or has there been more influence than one aspect over another, over, you know, time and place, or your travel experience, or your ancestral history? As things you talked about poetry changing, you know, when you mentioned at the outset about women poetry and so on, your own poetry, has it changed over time in that regard in any way in terms of things that influence it?
I'd like to think that it's become better.
It's always been good.
Brilliant.
All poets would like to be better poets. And poets don't want to write, at least most poets don't want to write the same book again and again and again. There are poets, and those of you who read a lot of poetry know that there are poets who tend to write versions of the same book repeatedly. There's no strong development. I, on the other hand, would feel that my next book should be open to another book that's open to another book, each of them different. Have I, do I sort of surf on waves, this wave and then another wave and another wave? I think that's part of your question. I'm not sure, although I must say that in the last 2 or 3 volumes, I've written a lot of travel poetry. We've done much of our traveling in the last 3 decades, although as an academic, I did a fair amount of traveling as well. But travel poetry is a tricky business, or writing a travel poetry is a tricky business, in that you can just write narratives, this detail followed by another detail, a series of details, without creating a world that transforms that material and that possesses the reader. That's always the challenge. I also, throughout my career, have written nature poetry, and I think I've written more nature poetry in recent years. As a member of the Jewish Studies Committee and the welcome they gave us at Purdue University, which the committee was open to people from many different backgrounds and different religious persuasions, and some with no persuasion. But it was, for me, an entry into Jewish communities, both the conservative community and their shul or synagogue, and the Reform congregation, Temple Israel. I spoke at both a couple of times at the shul, and spoke a number of times at Temple Israel. And I think it was that plus a little bit of DNA in my case that made me deeply aware of the history of the Holocaust and the long 2,000 years of incredible prejudice against Jews, the horrible massacres that occurred over the centuries. And I interviewed some survivors of camps. I also took my parents, my wife, and children to several of the camps, concentration camps. That made everything a little more real and more unforgettable, of course. I'm not sure I answered your question, but I would say that nature poetry, poetry about dispossession, and poetry about travel pretty much dominate the latest volumes.
Thank you.